Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to another episode of the NTC podcast. This is episode 115, and I'm your host, Aaron Washington. Glad to be back with you guys on another installment. Once again, Tyagi joins me on my right to dive into some conference final action, guys. So we're getting towards the home stretch of the season here, and we find ourselves in the semifinals of the NBA playoffs. So we're going to get into the two series here that are going to be a part of the conference finals, East and West. Avi and I are going to give our thoughts on that, give some predictions here, and see how things might shake out for these final two rounds. Avi, you ready for some conference finals action, man? Should be a hell of a ride, man.
Always ready. Always ready. I love the Final Four. That's what this really is. I feel like in every sport, the Final Four is something special. Regardless of how far you end up going from here, just to even reach the Final Four in such a competitive sport always feels like a real accomplishment. And it's something most fan bases wait a long time for. There are multiple fan bases right now that are on like a 2-decade stretch of never making a Final Four like this. So it's a really special moment. And I love the teams that have made it. So, I'm excited.
Dude, it's such an exciting time because all these teams are, like you said earlier, you were on an adrenaline high going into today after
Yeah.
yesterday's events. Imagine how these teams feel going into these matchups. And one of the teams here that we're going to cover, actually two of the teams, they're coming off of game sevens, man. So, they're like, their energy level is here. Like they're just happy to be here after narrowly escaping their series. And it's hard for any team to make it this far. Like it's super, super difficult to get to the Final Four in the NBA, especially in today's era where there's more parity than ever. You never know who's going to make it from year to year. There's no more Warriors, Cavs, Heat of the early 2010s. It's almost like a free for all now, man. It's really incredible to see how things are shaking out every year, where it's like the defending champion can't make it past the second round for now the sixth straight year. When you think about it like that, it's like, sheesh, it really is a different NBA today. So
we haven't had that since the 70s, and the talent level is completely different from where we were at back then. If you look at it, the modern salary cap, the way we know it, kind of started in 2004, right? You look at with the CBA before this current one, the CBA before that kind of instituted a lot of the changes, kind of leading to the structure where we're at now, where it's just so difficult. You have to be so precise with your roster construction. You have to hit on all your draft picks. You need to find contributors like Nikhil Alexander-Walker or Naz Reid out of nowhere. Like it's never been more difficult to be a great team in the league. I don't think it's ever been more important to have depth around your stars.
We saw it in the Timberwolves Sun series, how those teams really contrasted in their styles and their team construction, and obviously one just bulldozed the other one. And now here they are in the conference finals, going up against the Dallas Mavericks. So we're going to lean into that now, Avi, getting into this first matchup here. Western Conference Finals, it will be the Dallas Mavericks versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. And as you mentioned, Avi, this team here in Minnesota, 20 years in between Western Conference Final appearances. What was wild, though, is yesterday, May 19th, it was 20 years to the day that they actually won Game 7 in Target Center at home versus the Sacramento Kings way back there, 2004. So hopefully for their sake, for the fans' sake, they can get over the hump this time. Unfortunately, they ran into Shaq and Kobe 20 years ago. They lost in 7 games to that team. No harm in that, no shame in that. But this year they have another chance to get over the hump and get to their first finals in franchise history. So this is their opportunity here. But before that, they're going to have to get through Dallas. So for the Timberwolves here, they're coming off of that 7-game just absolute brawl versus the Nuggets. It was
modern day classic. That's what it was.
It really was like back and forth. 2 games for the Timberwolves, 2 games for the Nuggets. It was so back and forth, man. It's like, as soon as the team gains momentum and you're convinced like, oh man, they're going to take over, the series is over, here comes the other team and it's shifting back the other way. So that made it so much fun to watch, and kind of seeing how like this new era of the NBA is setting itself up with Ant overcoming the defending champion Nuggets. He's kind of inserting himself now in this playoff setting, saying like, hey, I'm here. I'm ready to take my place among the most elite of the elite in the NBA. So that series for Minnesota was, like I said, it was just so tough for them and went back and forth. But I think it really kind of refined them in a sense and allowed them to kind of figure out what works, what doesn't. how these rotations are going to work, how they kind of compensate if they don't have Gobert, if Cat is in foul trouble. They faced some various situations like that. If Conley is out, how do they deal with that? So they were able to kind of tinker their lineups accordingly. And by all accounts, I mean, even with those issues, they came out on top and found a way to overcome those issues. So that's definitely a plus for them leading into the series.
I mean, that series was a masterclass of coaching, and ultimately, there's a variety of different factors that kind of led to victory. But there was one factor I still had to point out, and I'm going to keep harping on it because I really think that, especially yesterday with the game sevens, it was a clear case of the best teams won, not the best lineups, the best teams. The
Yep.
Knicks have we were harping on it with the Knicks. Hey, don't play your guys 40 plus minutes. You have other players on your bench. Try to get them going early on. Make sure that your main players don't have their legs shot later in the playoffs. And we get to a game seven, and with the way the Pacers play, what ends up happening? The Knicks have nothing left in their legs. Alec Burks is the only guy with any juice, and he looks like a god. They're chanting his name in the
Yep.
Garden. Like, that's where we're at. He could have been playing much more earlier in the series and in the last series, and
Yep.
frankly in Game 82. And then with the Timberwolves, rain or shine, there's one man they could count on coming off the bench. If Karl-Anthony Towns ever gets into foul trouble, we have one man who we want guarding Nikola Jokic. Nas Reed, baby.
Man of the
I
year,
mean,
man.
the liability of their bench honestly won them the series. Because if you look at it, that series was the most back and forth masterclass I've seen on both sides of the ball. We have this 2-game stretch where it seems like, oh, maybe all hope is lost for the Nuggets. I came on this pod and I thought, well, I mean, if this keeps up, it's going to be a sweep.
Yep.
Not knowing how effective the Nuggets counter would be of, oh, just letting Aaron Gordon be the one to bring the ball up. And, oh, I guess with another 4 days of rest, all of a sudden Jamal Murray looks like himself again. So
Yep.
game 3 and 4, it's a completely different series. That game 4, that halftime sequence where all of a sudden they catch on fire from 3, Jamal Murray hits that 55-foot shot. I mean, you think from that moment on, momentum's going to swing completely against them. Then we get to game 5. They don't have Conley. Without Conley, the Timberwolves offense looks like a shell of itself. They can just double Ant at will. There's nobody really who can kind of run other actions. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is great, but he's not a point guard per se. That was kind of the issue he had with the Pelicans back in the day. That's why he got shipped in the first place. So without Conley, Monte Morris, none of these guys coming off the bench could really do what Conley does. He's a supremely underrated player. I really think him and Drew Holiday to me are two players who I feel like have underrated Hall of Fame cases. And I feel like as the Timberwolves keep winning, Conley, Gobert, Cat, all of these guys who have been underrated for years are starting to get some shine. Conley was imperative to their Game 6 victory. It seemed like after learning from how they got stifled in Game 5, the third quarter on of Game 6 was a masterclass in how the Timberwolves completely reshaped their offense. Curl was so much more aggressive against double teams. Every time they tried to double from up top, he knew exactly where to pass the ball to. There was a 2-minute stretch in the middle of the third quarter of Game 6 where the scores were relatively even. They dumped it into Carl multiple times when Ant was getting doubled. And as soon as a double tried coming to Carl, he knew exactly where to dump the ball off. They would tic-tac-toe and either get a layup or a multiple threes off of it. And it kind of kept their offense flowing. They started using Ant more as a screener, which was highly effective because then if you just pass it back to Ant and the Nuggets had tried to switch, well, now it's not KCP guarding him anymore. Now it's either Aaron Gordon, who's going to blow by, or Nikola Jokic, who he can do whatever he wants to. And you have Conley starting to run more pick and rolls when Ant screens off of him if nobody switches there. Now you have someone trailing Conley. He can run a perfect pick and roll with Cat or with Gobert, and he knows exactly how to get the ball to Gobert where he wants it. So you just had all these offensive actions that started flowing in Game 6, which led to the complete beatdown. And then Game 7 was just all heart and hustle, baby. I mean, that was a Game 7. That first half, it was the Timberwolves were completely off, and then in the second half, the Nuggets just started missing all the same shots that the Timberwolves were in the first half, and you get this weird outcome where it feels like both teams played relatively well, but were also having off nights, but not at the same time.
Right.
The Timberwolves had the off night first, and then the Nuggets decided to have an off night as the Timberwolves started picking up. And there was only two real factors in that game that really separated both teams. One, actually, I guess really it is just one factor. It's the one factor that kind of split itself into two parts. The physicality of the Timberwolves ultimately ended up winning them that game. Physicality in terms of defense, they were the ones that were able to generate more steals and blocks than the Nuggets just because they have those long, lanky defenders. They have Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Edwards who were just attacking Jamal Murray as soon as he crossed half court again. Or anytime Aaron Gordon tried to like pass it back out, if he got kind of caught in the middle with the ball because Gobert was disrespecting him, they knew exactly what his passing route was going to be and they tried attacking that. And then on offense, when you play with that much physicality and you have Jaden McDaniels playing that aggressively, you're just going to generate way more free throws than the Nuggets did. And in a game like that, where both teams are kind of missing so many open threes and a lot of open shots, getting to the free throw line that much more than your opponent, that'll win you a game.
Absolutely. So, I mean, for all those reasons you mentioned, man, the Timberwolves find themselves on top. Now, going into this next series, it's going to be, a different battle. So,
Yeah.
you're going against the Nuggets here. They had that incredible starting lineup, and they leaned on that quite a bit. And, of course, they ran out of steam towards the end. The Mavericks match up, honestly, on paper, I think better than Denver did, just in terms of having multiple options off that bench, having a pretty big lineup overall in that starting lineup. You got after Kyrie, I mean, you're looking at Luka after Luka and the rest of that lineup. I mean, we're talking about 6, 7, and on for the rest of that lineup. So big, long defenders, and definitely going to be a battle for Minnesota. So I'm just wondering how Cat's going to fare in this series. So he was in foul trouble in game 7 against the Nuggets. That allowed Nasri to come in, make his impact for the last few minutes of that game. Cat's going to have his hands full. So he's going against PJ Washington. PJ Washington that has had a great playoff run so far. And then the double center duo for the Mavericks of Gafford and Lively. And we spoke about Lively's impact in their final game against the Thunder in that game 6. Bravo to him. Newly crowned all NBA or all rookie second team as of today.
Yeah.
Well deserved.
He was
Honestly,
phenomenal.
borderline first team. Like he was
Yes.
really, really good this year. Like such a great impact for the Mavericks. He could not have gone to a better team to utilize his talents. You have Luka there. You have Kyrie. They're going to draw attention. Lively's going to find himself in a short roll situation. He's going to have lob opportunities. He's going to have opportunities to, just protect the rim and just demonstrate his energy. And he did that on a great level against the Thunder. So now going into this series, it's going to be that battle versus Cat versus Gobert. I think for both sides, they're honestly going to have their hands full. So I'm really keeping an eye on Cat to see how he does. I think he's going to have a great series. And it's interesting because that game 7 before he got into foul trouble, I mean, he was at 23 and 12. Like he was really giving the Nuggets problems in a big way. So I think that's
Yeah.
going to carry over into this series. I mean, all respect to Lively, PJ Washington, Gafford, like those guys are great, and they've been very impactful defensively for Dallas, and it's a big reason why they've turned their defense around from the first half of the season to the second half of the season. Totally different team. We talked about it in the regular season. They were more of like a top 5, top 10 defense after the trade, and that's huge for them. So I'm just kind of curious to see how the front court battle shakes out with, I presume, PJ trying to stick with Cat, Gaffer trying to stick with Gobert, and whether they put McDaniels on either Luka or Derrick Jones Jr. That's going to be really interesting to see. A lot of big bodies in this matchup, and I think it's going to be incredibly physical, pretty much the entire way for those reasons. So that's just something that caught my eye. Like, is Cat going to be able to stay on the floor? Is he going to be able to, stay in the game, stay focused, even if things get physical? I think he will. I honestly think he will. Although this matchup is a little bit different from Denver. He doesn't have a All NBA first team big man to deal with, but those other guys, like we mentioned before, they're full of energy and activity. They're going to be on the boards. They're going to be looking to make an impact. So, for the Wolves, they got to stay disciplined, stay true to themselves. And I think based on what they dealt with in last series and what they displayed, I think they will, just in my opinion.
It's interesting. I actually think that this matchup is better for the Timberwolves to face than the Nuggets were, specifically because when you start looking at the way the Mavericks were able to kind of counter the Thunder towards the end of that series, because again, we did a pod after game 1, and after game 1, my biggest takeaway was if Luka looks the way he did in game one, this series will be a wrap.
Hmm.
Luckily for everyone, well, maybe not Thunder fans, but luckily for everybody else, Luka started looking better and better as the series went on, and that kind of changed things. It forced them, the Thunder, to get even more extreme with their coverages, where they just started going all out with like, okay, we're just going to basically shade one and a half, shade half a guy towards Kyrie at all time, um, basically try to cover the paint whenever Luka has the ball, and maybe send him a double too, to the point where they were just leaving the corners wide open. Like, hey, if PJ Washington or Derek Jones is going to beat us, whatever, we'll tip our cap, and they did beat them.
They did.
I
Hmm.
don't think the Timberwolves are gonna have to do that because I feel like their matchups one on one are better. And the
Yeah.
biggest difference is the difference between Gobert right now and the difference between Chet. As the series went on, Chet started getting more tired, and the Mavericks started doing a great job of, hey, we have Gafford and Lively. We'll just keep subbing them in and out, and they're going to be more fresh than Chet is. And so we reach a point in game seven where Lively, in the fourth quarter, takes over the game, offensive rebound after offensive rebound. He's just destroying Chet on the glass. Chet's feet basically stop moving. Like, with a running back, they always tell you to turn your feet. Chet
Hmm.
was just kind of standing there standstill while Lively is just buzzing all around and grabbing up boards. There was a couple boards where they have three people crashing in to try to two people crashing in to try to help Chet get a rebound, and Lively just goes over the top and palms it with one hand. Like
Hmm.
one of my biggest complaints actually about Lively over the course of the season was the fact that I didn't think him or Gafford are like natural rebounders per se. So the performance he had later in the series was phenomenal and a key reason they were able to win it in six. I think Gobert is, first of all, he's bigger right now. He's sturdier. He's stronger. But I also think he's probably better conditioned for a playoff run than Chet is. After all, this
Oh
was
yeah.
Chet's first playoff run, and Chet
Yeah.
started looking a little bit gassed by the end of it. So did Jalen Williams. I think the Timberwolves roster is better equipped for a longer playoff series.
Hmm.
And I don't think they're going to be as extreme about the coverages where they're just leaving PJ Washington, Derek Jones to be like
No, they don't
leading
need
scorers
to.
like this.
You got
So,
Ant, you got
yeah,
McDaniels, so they're going to
yeah,
have the one-on-one coverage to be able to hang around and not have to send doubles, not have to shade. They can really just, if they want to switch depending on the matchup or, something more conservative, so they don't have to sell out and leave people
yeah.
open.
Because part of the reason they were doubling was because if you tried, their problem was there is no way we can play this 2-on-2 and get an outcome that we want. Because if we're playing
Right.
their pick and roll 2-on-2 here, Luca's either going to beat our guy, and if we try to step up to Luca, he's just going to throw the lob over us. Gobert
Hmm.
is also kind of the best guy at the cat and mouse game. It's part of why he won
Yeah.
DPOY over Wemby. There is, with the Draymond kind of starting to level off with age, right now, I think there is no one better at playing that cat and mouse game and being great at denying the opposing center at getting easy paint touches and easy paint attempts than Rudy Gobert.
Hmm.
So that kind of gives them more of a counter of, hey, maybe we are the one team that has a chance to kind of play this 2-on-2 without having to shade off of the strong side corner as often as the Thunder were doing because they were just going fully extreme. So
Hmm.
I really do think after the Nuggets series, once you face Jokic and Murray, it, it might just get easier from there,
Honestly, yeah.
which is
And I mean,
weird to say, but
yeah, it's weird, but I think you're right. Like, and you look at how Gobert has fared so far. Like, he doesn't post the craziest box score numbers a lot, but you sent me a screenshot earlier today to where he has the highest plus minus in the playoffs, plus
yes,
111.
sir.
So plus minus isn't everything. We're not trying to say that just means he's like an MVP candidate or something. But I mean, his impact is undeniable. And you brought up the fact about his conditioning. He has been awesome, and he's not getting as worn down as those other guys you mentioned before. So with
Yeah,
Gobert, he continues to be just as active as he was earlier in the game, earlier in the series. He continues to move around. And yes, he is awesome at that cat and mouse. So it's like, hey, he can at least make some kind of an effort closer to the ball screen, but also not leave his man completely open behind him for that lob. So he's kind of like, you can kind of bait people in a sense so that you try to make that thing work. Like Luca might try to make a lob work to Lively or Gafford. And he's like, hey, listen, I know what you guys are trying to do. I am 7'1" with a 7 whatever wingspan and just kind of deter those looks. So for him, that's going to be, he's going to have a huge impact, I think. And I think also a big reason why he's fresh and Cat's fresh having Naz Reid to come in and
Yeah.
kind of, provide some relief for those guys is huge. Like when Cat had that fifth foul late in the fourth quarter of game 7 last night, Naz Reid came in and had a block on Jokic. He had a drive and a layup, a Euro step layup. He had an offensive rebound, which he got fouled on. Then he had another block on Jokic. Then he had a tip dunk, a one-handed dunk, which is pretty impressive. And then he had that assist to Ant in semi-transition for 3 in the right corner. That pretty much, like, I would say, iced the game for them.
Yeah, I
So he
did.
just had that whole sequence to where, like, he's a two-way big, and that's not something that we talked about this before, but like Naz Reid has really improved his game on that end, defensive end of the floor, being able to hold it with Jokic. Like, I don't think anybody would have seen that coming last season or even early this season. Like, if you had told people he's going to go one-on-one with Jokic and hold his own, I mean, that's just incredible development for him. So that's such a luxury to where, like, having Cat in foul trouble is not a death sentence like it used to be. It doesn't put you in a super crazy disadvantage in the front court, so he can maintain his impact there. That's huge. So now looking on the other side of things, if we're talking about getting worn down, uh, Luka did have some issues with that earlier in that series, but as things went on, again, he looked better. I just wonder if he's going to be able to maintain uh, that impact, because with this team going against Ann and going against McDaniels and all these long defenders, he's going to have his work cut out for him. They're going to make him work. So for Luka, you look at his stats, it's like, okay, I mean, triple doubles, he's 9 point over 9 rebounds assists per game. He's always going to have that box score beauty to his game, but the efficiency has waned in these playoffs so far. Only 30% from 3. He was 38% from 3 in the regular season, so his impact from 3 is definitely diminished. And I think that's going to once again call into action Kyrie Irving to assume a little bit more of that role. But what's interesting, though, is he hasn't really done that in these playoffs. He's actually had a less of a role than he had in
Mhm.
the regular season. So he was at about 28% usage regular season, 23% in the playoffs. About 19 shots a game regular season, 16 shots per game in the playoffs. And I think part of that is because they're getting such a great contribution from those role players. So you look at what Derrick Jones has done in these playoffs, especially in that last round. Uh, he was fantastic, man. I feel like at this point, every three he puts up is going in. And he's shooting 37% from the playoffs. I'm pretty sure it's closer to 40% for that last series, if not higher. Like, he was just lights out on those catch and shoot looks. Luka was getting doubled, like you mentioned, by the Thunder, and the corners were open, the wings were open for threes. So Derrick Jones has been awesome. PJ Washington killed the Thunder in a few games in that last series with his shooting, with his ability to catch and drive off of closeouts. We talked about him in a former podcast around the time of that trade, and we talked about what he can do on that team, and he's lived up to the billing like incredibly well. I
I
love
did
what he's
not
done
see
with
this
that
coming.
team.
I said
Yeah,
some things about the Mavericks trades that clearly ended up being proven wrong. PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford, maybe those are the guys you should be trying to trade for because they made a huge difference.
I
It's
mean, a
crazy how
world
different
of
this rotation looks to the one last year that missed the playoffs. I was going to lead into this eventually, but now that we're here, I might as well say it. This is more evidence that a lot of times when you have these star duos, people focus so much attention on, well, the star duo is not working. Maybe we should split them up. Maybe we should trade them away. A lot of times, it's not about the star duo. It's about everyone else around them. People were saying for
Mhm.
years, oh, Tatum and Brown, I guess they can't work anymore. Yeah, well, you just run them with great depth, and all of a sudden they're the 1 seed. They're probably going to cruise through the East again.
Yep.
They've made multiple finals and conference finals. I don't even know how many years in a row at this point. You have the same thing with the Mavs. They look like an 11 seed. Oh, but guess what happens? Now we had Gafford, we had Derrick Jones Jr. in free agency. We trade for PJ Washington. We draft Lively. Wow, this team looks completely different. Now we're
Mhm.
back in the Western Conference Finals. It's
Yep.
amazing how different things can look when you surround your two stars with actually good supporting cast members to the point where the Thunder will try to just basically shade all the attention towards the rim runner and your two stars. But you have PJ Washington shoot 47% from three and Derrick Jones Jr. shoot 37% from three while being the main guy on Shea, which is an incredibly difficult assignment because Shea was the best player in that series.
Yep.
So you really need that supporting cast to step up. And that's what the Mavericks got. If it wasn't for them being that on fire from three, this series might not be where it is, but they did an excellent job at being decisive off the catch. Okay, I know they're leaving me open here in the corners. I'm just going to shoot. And they were just cashing in.
They were definitely cashing in, and then also they were just they weren't. They, I mean, they knew what they wanted to do as soon as they caught the ball.
Yeah.
Matt Issa, he writes for a variety of outlets, SB Nation, Opta Analyst, just to name a couple. He posted an article, basically summarizing the difference between really impactful role players in the playoffs and other role players that struggle in the playoffs. And the examples he used are Derrick Jones Jr. for the positive and Isaac Okoro for the negative. And he basically was talking about how Derrick Jones Jr. is shooting at a much higher clip than Isaac Okoro is, and he's having a higher impact defensively than Okoro with his length, using his athleticism to hang with some of those guys he's guarding. And then I think he also talked about how they're finishing with guys like that. I mean, if you're going to start gathering closeouts, you have to be able to react off of that. And you can't just shoot every time. So for Derrick Jones, he's catching it. He's immediately getting at least in the mid range, if not all the way to the rim. He's finishing well. So he's kind of capitalizing off of those bent defenses that occur as a result of the doubles, the heavy rotations over to Luka, over to Kyrie. And that's a part of their game for him and PJ Washington. That's going to be huge in this upcoming series. They have to continue to be decisive players, not just settling for threes. But if you have a mismatch for PJ Washington, utilizing his size in the post on that opportunity. For Derrick Jones Jr., if somebody's off balance, being able to drive in the paint, make the right pass if necessary, finish yourself, make yourself available for lobs. So many opportunities for these guys. And that's why I think they're both having career years because they have these great gifts, but they're not as impactful unless you pair them with incredibly just high impact player like Luka or Kyrie to gather attention and just give those guys space to operate. Because when they have space, they are deadly. So that role player versus role player battle between these two teams, it's going to be huge because they both have 2 or 3 guys that can give you 10, 15, 20 points any given night. So that is really going to swing this series, I think, just looking at how the depth that both teams bring to the table.
Derrick Jones Jr. has never shot more threes per 100 possessions than he has this year with Dallas, to kind of further your point there. And again, this is why every time people say 3 and D, you can ascribe them to a lot of players as draft prospects. I'm going to be getting to it later. I'm going to be releasing more draft stuff eventually. Talked with Oliver too, by the way. Love that pod. With these prospects, there are levels of 3 and D. And when you have someone like Derrick Jones Jr. versus Isaac Okoro, the lack of passivity in terms of I feel confident and ready that even if I'm not a great 3-point shooter, I can still get it up with volume, and I have a relatively quick release versus Okoro, whose release might already be a little bit slower. And then you couple that with the fact that he's always thinking about, oh, should I slash or should I shoot? That kind of couples itself and creates many problems. It's not someone like actually Jeff Green, if you look at Jeff Green in 2016, 2017, it looked like his career was about to wind down. And then that season, he signed with the Cavs and basically found his niche now as, okay, I am now a role player who shoots threes. He's not even a great defender at this point in his career, but he was so decisive as a 3-point shooter, and he's still Uncle Jeff. He's still got that finishing game. So he can still kind of play off of a great passer and kind of still finish off with dunks the way Derrick Jones Jr. does. So that kind of extended his career an extra 6-7 years to the point where we're looking at Uncle Jeff, and he's in year 17, and he's still getting a decent amount of minutes for the Houston Rockets. It's amazing what a difference it can make when you're able to develop your 3-point shooting, your confidence in your 3-point shooting. You become really good, even as a role player, at being able to read the moment, something that Grant Williams kind of struggled with versus PJ Washington, as we highlighted earlier in the season, where Grant's kind of like, I'm not great at attacking closeouts. I also don't know what moves to attack with. Whereas someone like PJ Washington, okay, if you close out too hard against me, PJ Washington has enough of a bag to kind of be able to attack that and generate offense for himself at the rim. It just makes such a difference, and it's why a team like the Cavs is sitting at home, and it's why a team like the Mavericks is now in the Final Four.
Exactly, man. All really great points. And for those reasons, this series is going to be fascinating because they match up so well with each other and they have some things in common for sure. They both have a couple of high level superstar talents and they both have the depth to compensate. So can't wait to see how that one unfolds. But speaking of the Cavaliers, Cavaliers were just eliminated in 5 games by none other than the number one seeded Boston Celtics. So the Celtics Pacers series is where we're going to take this conversation next for the Eastern Conference Finals. So the Celtics all season long have been just an absolute juggernaut. They won 64 games in the regular season. They had incredible winning streaks. They had an incredible home record. I think they were like 20-0 at one point at home. All the metrics are incredible. Top three, I believe, in offense and defensive efficiency all season long. All the numbers are so pretty, and yet there's a level of doubt in people's minds about this team, which is crazy to say about a team that on the surface looks so perfectly set up to win a championship. There's still doubt in people's minds. But to this point, they've looked like a team, for the most part, that's worthy of serious championship consideration. They come into the playoffs here at this point among teams that are still in the playoffs, number 2 in 3-point percentage, 37%, 37.7. Second in 2-point percentage, so that's at 57.2%. And they're first among teams still in the playoffs in opponent points per game at just 96.7. So you look at the offense and the defense, the numbers still look great for the Celtics. Like they look great by the metric. Now, here's the question, though. When it comes to the Celtics, they still are prone to letdowns. They had those 2 straight games in the regular season versus the Atlanta Hawks where it was just 2 terrible losses in a row to where you're saying, like, okay, what is wrong with this team? Why are they lapsing right now? They had that letdown against the Cavaliers in the second round, game 2, where they lost that game 118-94. So they have times to where they don't really seem like the team that we're accustomed to seeing on a night-to-night basis that just kind of dominates. So the big question for them going in here, aside from the inconsistency, is, hey, Porzingis, what's up with Porzingis? How is he looking right now? They didn't have Porzingis at all in that series against the Cavaliers. Of course, they didn't need him. Horford filled in pretty well for them. But to really be the Celtics that we know, that are just dominant as we've seen, they really need Porzingis back in the fold. We talked about how their best 5, their starting 5, work so well together, how their metrics are so perfect. That Holiday, White, Brown, Tatum, and Porzingis lineup has an efficiency differential of plus 12 and almost 1,300 possessions, according to Cleaning the Glass. And we've thrown out some numbers about them in the past as well. It's like about how their guys are so great together. But they really need Porzingis to be whole, to be the actual best version of themselves we've gotten to know, both on offense and defense. And it's going to be an absolute terror to guard them if he can get back in the series. So that's a big question for sure. And then there was a great question on Twitter that I saw by, again, Matt Issa. He posed this question. It was, I think it was phrased, who is your all role player team in the playoffs as of today? So, throw out a 5 or, who are your best players, role players in the playoffs right now, non-all-star players. And I think one of the first names that comes to mind for me is Derek White in this scenario. Derek White is averaging 18 points per game right now.
That feels like cheating, man.
This shooting, dude, that's exactly right.
That feels like cheating is what I said. Does he still count anymore? Like, he was legitimately almost an all-star in some people's books. Like, he was at least sub-all-star status. At some point, don't you graduate? He's also kind of their main. He's their main for all purposes. He's basically their point guard at this point, with Drew Holiday just making himself the 5th option. Like, at some point, if you're kind of the point guard at this point, do you still get to be called a role player? You have like the best plus minus on the team for the season. You have the best plus minus on the team for a lot of these playoff games. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I was just going based off
the
criteria. Point. He said non-all-star, and he hasn't made an all-star team.
Oh, man.
I mean, we can call him a superstar role player. I don't know. He's in kind of like a different class now. but his shooting is like on another level right now. 57% from two, 43 from three, 88 from the line. So 50, 40, almost 90 in these playoffs so far. So, I mean, if Derek is playing like this, Porzingis is healthy. The other guys, you know what you're going to get from them, Tatum and Brown. Holiday, he's just going to be sturdy. He's going to be solid. He kind of fits. I think you compared him to Mike Conley earlier. Okay, he's not going to score 25, 30. He's not going to have the gaudiest numbers. But when it's time to make a winning play, they're going to be in that spot at that time, ready to do something, ready to get a stop, make a catch and shoot three, make the right play. So he's going to be ready to play for sure. But I guess to pass it off to you, Avi, it's going to be just looking at their commitment on defense against this Pacers team. Like Indiana, 30 assists per game in the playoffs. I don't know if you knew that. 30 assists per game. Number one. Number two team in assists per game. They're behind by 5 assists per game, only at about 25 per game.
Makes
So
sense.
this is a team they can't afford to be lax. But how do you feel about them going in? And they really just going to come in and lock in and just shut down Indiana from the jump? What do you think?
It's the Celtics, so I'm sure whatever I think they're going to win it in, add an extra game, and that's probably how the series will actually finish. They always lose that one game they're not supposed to, so it doesn't even. If I say
Okay.
5, they'll say 6. If I say 4, they'll say 5. It doesn't matter at this point. I mean, with all the advanced stats and everything that paint Boston in such a good light, those aren't necessarily incorrect, but at the same time, when you're comparing them to other playoff teams within not just their conference but across the league, it almost kind of feels like cheating because it's like, well, I mean, kind of look at who you've had to play. Like you got some pretty
Not
easy matchups, man. You got
not the best
a beat
competition.
down Heat
True.
team and a beat down Cavs team. Yeah, your advanced stats better look really good after that matchup.
Yeah.
I don't feel thoroughly impressed to watch them. I still feel like I'm watching, same old Celtics basketball in a lot of ways. There's still too much stagnation. They're still too reliant on isolations. Their assist total for my liking is too low. And yet at the same time, this Pacers team feels like it's ahead of schedule. I can't believe that they were able to survive the Buddy Hield trade as well as they did. I thought it was going to be a disaster, and frankly, it probably should have been, except for the fact that Ben Shepherd all of a sudden just became, um, he basically became diet Buddy Hield for them almost in a way. I mean, he's not shooting off the catch, but just in terms of he was making every 3-pointer for them, and I'm pretty sure they had kind of penciled in Doug McDermott to kind of taking that role. That's why they traded for him in the first place. So it was the Pacers are kind of ahead of schedule, and they play fast, and they can wear and tear on you if you let them get to a 7-game series. But with Derek White and Drew Holiday, I'm sure Porzingis will be back probably by the middle of the series. I don't know, man.
I don't. I think the Celtics still, based on what we saw in the regular season. Like I know, regular season is not playoffs. In the playoffs, they kind of have their moments where they go in and out. But I mean, when they're locked in, it's hard to bet against them with the star power they have, with the incredible starting five that they have. They have a couple of guys off the bench they can really trust to make an impact. I think they'll be okay. My initial estimate is I want to say 5 games. They get the Pacers in 5 games, but like you said, there could be an extra one there. There could be an extra letdown. You never know, especially if Ben Shepherd's going to keep shooting like this. Like I have some percentages here to back up your point.
Yeah.
50% on corner threes, 50% in the mid range, and 41.7% non-corner threes for percentage. That just goes to show you, man. I
That's
mean,
just
Ben
silly.
Shepherd's been incredible. Yep. I was looking at the NBA University Twitter page before we came on, and there was a really good tweet about Ben Shepherd, just talking about not just his shooting, but his on-ball defense, his screen navigation has been
Yeah.
awesome. In that series, picking up Brunson at times, picking up DiVincenzo, picking up Hart, just being able to just stay with his man and not causing his team to run into like these crazy rotations it was really impressive. It's a big reason why Indiana is not the same defensive team now as we saw earlier in the season. Kind of similar to the Mavericks, like they made a huge jump, and I think Ben Shepherd is a big reason why. But they can also rely on a couple other guys. Andrew Nimard, pretty solid on
Yeah.
ball. TJ McConnell, great job on Brunson that last series. I was very
Great
impressed.
series for him. I mean,
Yep.
he's been phenomenal. Again, I don't think the Pacers had planned this out that well. I mean, I still can't believe they did that Doug McDermott trade only for him to basically be a complete non-factor. They really lucked into some things. I'm pretty sure they had intended for Doug McDermott and Ben Mathurin at the time to kind of become their playoff contributors. But then to watch Obi Toppin, TJ McConnell, they got good Isaiah Jackson minutes. Like some of the guys who they kind of left for dead there, those were the guys who stepped up and decided to carry this Pacers team through against some of these teams that are, some of them were injured, but again, the Knicks injuries are kind of, their fault. They just did an excellent job at building off of the ethos that Tyrese Halliburton has brought to the Pacers, which is we are the Pacers by name, we are the Pacers by game. Everybody has to kind of, keep it going. Made basket, missed basket, doesn't matter. You got to push it down there to the front court as fast as you can. And McConnell has done a great job. I mean, I think I saw some Indiana fans started calling him TJ Nash, which I thought was funny just because he was gnashing around so much.
Love it.
But,
I love it.
I mean, hey, if the shoe fits, he was doing the job, man.
He does utilize the Nash dribble quite a bit
Yeah.
when he's in the paint there. So I mean, I can see it. But he's been awesome, averaging about 10.8 points per game and 5.3 assists in almost 20 minutes per game. So he has a sizable role off the bench.
Yep.
Obi Toppin, 11 points per game on 69% from 2-point range in 19 minutes per game. So just hyper efficient, man. You know what you're going to get from him, high energy. Like he's a perfect fit for this team. He didn't really find his niche in New York, but when he got to Indiana, it's like, hey, man, space the floor, hit your threes. He shot 40% this season from three in the regular season. Incredible improvement there on his part as far as shooting. And then, like, dude, just get down the court, be ready for a lob from Halliburton. He's capitalized on that. And it's continued in the playoffs here. So those three bench players, all averaging 19 minutes or more per game, are going to be huge. And then Isaiah Jackson, about 10, 11 minutes per game. But his energy is going to be crucial. And if the Celtics are in a bench
block
line,
some shots, get some fouls, whatever. I mean, that's kind of been Isaiah Jackson's whole thing the whole time. He's an incredible shot blocker. His timing for that sort of thing is great, but he also jumps at everything, so he fouls a lot. He is kind of what he is, but in a setting like this, where you just need 12 good minutes and foul trouble probably isn't that big of a thing, if you play him early in quarters before the bonus is activated, it's actually fine. You can manage with him being out there, and you know what you're getting in terms of a rim runner and a good shot blocker. So you have a defensive paint presence for when Miles Turner subs out. So you can kind of build stuff in just knowing, okay, we have 12 minutes allotted for him, and we think they'll be pretty solid. So I feel like all of those factors can carry in to the Celtics series. The one thing that probably won't is the three-point shooting. Like, I'm just going to call it now. They shot like 43% as a team against the Knicks. That's probably never going to happen again. Like, as a team, that almost never happens. I'm just not going to count on that happening.
It's so incredible to think about. I mean, their shooting percentage in general was pretty crazy. At least that last game like blew my mind. I mean, they finished 67% from the field, highest in a playoff game, not game 7, a playoff game in general in NBA history, 67%. In the first half, they were at 76% from the field.
Yeah.
Like, just insane stuff, man. So I really think like the Celtics, I really feel like the Celtics are going to take this series. Like I'm not really worried that they're going to lose this series, but they have to be laced up, strapped up, ready to go. Because when you look at the Pacers, and they are the Pacers, like you said, they like to run. According to Cleaning the Glass, they are plus 4.9 points per 100 in as far as transition points per per possession. So plus 4.9 is an incredible rate, extremely high. In the regular season, they're about plus 3.1 per 100 possessions. So you look at their efficiency in that play type, like, man, you have to be ready to play. And I don't think Boston has been that great as far as transition defense. So when you pair that together, if the Celtics start turning it over, if they have some bad shots, if they they take some
Oh,
threes,
there will
long
be some bad
rebounds,
shots.
yeah, all the threes they take, there will be long rebounds. So the Pacers are going to
That's
grab
true.
that. TJ's going to grab that. Halliburton's going to grab that. They're off to the races. It could probably juice their offensive rating a little bit as it usually does. So I mean, honestly, I think the Celtics are going to be in for some fights here. Like I don't think it's going to be a wire to wire victory, at least not for the most part. It might be down to the wire, and then maybe the Celtics star power just wins out, and their overall just offensive brilliance. But the Pacers are pretty good on offense too. And even with the Celtics having a pretty good versatile defensive lineup, I think it's going to be tough to slow them down.
Here's my take that might be proven wrong very, very soon. I feel like if or when the Celtics lose games in this series, I think the score might not be close. And the reason is if the Celtics are losing, it's probably because they're going to be off from three. And if they're off and they're not getting some of those long rebounds, I think the Pacers will just continue to destroy them in transition and generate so many easy buckets that then it'll just become a tornado and they might not be able to come back from that. So,
Yeah.
in my expectation, if this series, suppose let's go six because I predict five. Let's say it goes six because it's the Celtics. I think those two losses might be by maybe double-digit margins, just because the Pacers are just going to keep piling it on. I wish this would be a learning series for the Celtics, but I know better than they expect that from them because it's been years now. They just never
They
learn.
don't learn.
I wish they would take something from the way the Pacers approach how to play basketball in terms of um, how developed their sense of timing is, how developed their tempo is, their pace, how great they are at involving each other in sets, um, how good they are at actually, as great as they are at 3 point shooting. We just talked about it. They shot 43%. Almost everything they do is actually still based off of we have to generate a paint touch first and then figure out what we're going to do next. Paint touches are the number one premium. Once you're in the paint, see if you can get a lob threat to one of our guys like or Isaiah Jackson. And if none of that is there, then oh great, we have shooters. We have a nicely spaced floor. Let's kick it out. The Celtics at times take some of those like, hey, I'm Tatum, I'm gonna just like dribble, step back three, where it's like you didn't need to do that, man. Like, let's
Yeah.
run something. Come on, man. I just because you've grown up watching 2000s basketball doesn't mean you need to copy it. There are better plays than just I'm a star, I can isolate. You are a
Yep.
star, I know you can isolate, but can you do something better than that?
Yeah.
I wish the Celtics would learn, but I don't know,
I
man.
mean,
I
it's
feel
just
like
who they
we've
are.
just seen it for years. It never changes.
It's who they are. It really is a
Yeah.
stark contrast when you look at their play styles. I think the Celtics have periods of time where you see that ball movement,
Yes.
where it's like the ball isn't
It's not
sticking.
all bad.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, they
yeah.
can move the ball, but then of course they revert to back to their normal habits, their old habits. I think that's part of the reason why they lost those games against Atlanta, and they had some of those
Yeah.
other letdowns in the regular season because they kind of devolved back into like what they're used to doing. It's kind of like their nature, like just to be ISO heavy players like Tatum and Brown want to just attack their matchup one on one, and it just leads to bad possessions. But the Pacers, on the other hand, they stay true to who they are. And that's
Mhm.
evidenced by their 30 assists per game, evidenced by their incredibly high offensive efficiency mark all through the regular season. Uh, their awesome shooting. Like, I think that shooting is an outlier from the last series. Like, I agree. I don't think they're going to shoot that well again. But some of it is a product of just the kind of shots they generate and just the way that all the role players are just empowered just to be who they are and not have to stand around and just not be involved in the offense. Like they're always involved. Nemhard's always involved.
Yeah.
Smith is always involved. Toppin, TJ McConnell, like all these guys are always in the offense. Like whether or not they get a shot out of it, they're passing it, they're driving, they're getting a rebound. So like, yeah, I really think that there are going to be some games here to where like the Celtics, it might even be game one. Like I wouldn't be surprised if it's game one where the Pacers come out here and say like, hey, this is who we are. The way you've been playing against a depleted Cleveland and a depleted Miami. Yeah, but it's not going to be the same story as playing those teams. You're going to have to bring a new level of focus, concentration, execution to get through a team like the Pacers with Halliburton, who was, as we mentioned before in this podcast, first, second team All NBA guy before he got hurt that hamstring. So I
Yeah.
mean, these guys aren't pushovers. They're in the conference finals for a reason. Yeah, the Knicks weren't healthy, yeah, but like they deserve to be here, and they're a very, very good basketball team. Improved offense, great coaching. Carlisle's a fantastic coach, great bench. It's gonna be competitive. It's gonna be competitive. So like I'm really not sure whether to pick 5 or 6 for the series. I was in 5, and then you brought up some of your points and how the Celtics usually have to take an extra game. I'm like, I'm reconsidering now. I'm reconsidering. So you got me thinking, man.
I'm just adding the Celtics tax. It happens every year. It happens almost every series. At this point, I'm just like, well, maybe I should just mentally factor in whatever number I'm going to say. Let me just add one to it. So
Yeah.
if I think
What's more?
5, it'll be 6. And
What's more? Yeah.
back to the point we were talking about with the Celtics being inconsistent, where you can tell that sometimes they make it a key focus of theirs to get ball movement, and sometimes they don't. In their Game 4 victory, they only had 15 assists. Then you look at their Game 5 victory, they had 32. So that's
There
kind
we
of the
go.
contrast right there.
They
They
can do
won
it.
both games. They won
Yeah.
both games, and the point differential margin wasn't that different. The number of points scored wasn't that different. But in terms of just how are those shots being created, night and day.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what the Celtics are sometimes. So
Exactly.
yeah, probably just gonna go 6 just because of that. Yeah. See, the thing is, I sound disappointed, but I don't know. It's hard to quantify. I sound disappointed despite the fact that the players individually within that series for the Celtics are phenomenal. I feel like I'm almost disappointed because I think with their talent and skill level, maybe there is a greater plane they can approach. But hey, maybe not. I mean, Drew and Derek White at this stage of their career, probably in the playoffs, are not people you want to be that sort of ball handling shot creator for other types. And then Tatum and Brown, this has kind of always been the knock on them in terms of being, primary playmakers. So maybe this just kind of is their setup. You'd hope for a little bit more consistency, but maybe this kind of is the way the team is built and kind of what they've chosen to not be the best at because they're almost the best at everything else.
That's a good way to look at it. Like every team has their flaw, and for the
Yeah,
Celtics, it might just be consistency, even with their great
consistency with
stats and
playmaking.
great
Yeah,
roster. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely going to be that's definitely something to look at. And also, what did they get from that bench? I think is like one last question I have from them. They've gotten good contributions this season. Looking at Pritchard's contribution, his
yeah.
performance, looking at Hauser's performance. Cornette had some moments, I think, in that last series where he was pretty solid. So they have some guys they can lean on. I wouldn't quite call them like McConnell or Isaiah Jackson necessarily, or
They're kind of
Toppin.
one-way players, right? You
Yeah,
know what you're getting from
yeah,
them offensively, and you're hoping to cover them up defensively. You probably have enough personnel, especially when Porzingis gets back, because you have the two bigs. You have like you can kind of go 6 deep with good defenders. So you can play someone like Hauser or Cornette or Payne Pritchard and be like, it's fine. We have other
yeah,
guys. It's fine. And I think in a series like against the Pacers, where if you look at it with the way the Pacers set up at least their half court offense, someone like Cornette, I think you can hide pretty well. Someone like Pritchard, you can hide pretty well. Aaron Neesmith isn't exactly much of a shot creator. So there are Ben Shepherd definitely isn't much of a shot creator. That's kind of the reason I had him on my fourth team for all rookie. I know that doesn't exist, but that's kind of my own list system. Is because some of the players the Pacers put in a half court setting can't generate shots for themselves. So if you can kind of slow them down, don't let them get that massive transition tempo advantage. Your bench should be able to do pretty well, and they're good scorers too. You can kind of still cut through the Pacers defense if you want. Halliburton's not great. Nemhard tries hard, but he's not someone who I want really guarding big wings. They don't have
yeah.
great defenders for that matchup. Siakam can do it, but I think that might exhaust him too much on the offensive end.
Mm-hmm.
Neesmith might be a little bit small. I maybe I can see him doing well on Jaylen Brown. Tatum, I'm not sure as much. So
Yeah.
we'll see how they approach it. It's not an optimal matchup for a team that's for the Pacers team that is still young, and I think defensively isn't equipped to handle someone like the Celtics in a half
They're
court
not.
situation. You know what?
That,
That's why they got to make it even more of an emphasis. We got to run, and Halliburton has to be aggressive.
yeah.
I can't see any more Halliburton games where he takes like 7 shots. If he has any
No,
more games where he
it can't
takes
happen.
7 shots, this is over.
It can't
Like
happen.
we can't be having this. I need that. I need the game 7 talking trash, pointing to people across the bench. I need that Halliburton. Even if
Yep.
he's not on fire, there was a stretch, I think it was like in the first quarter, he generates a great paint touch, doesn't even look at the rim, tries this weird like 360 jump in the air, no
I
scope
remember.
pass.
Yeah, I
Right? I'm
remember.
like, what is he doing?
Yep.
Oh my god, is it going to be
You don't
another
need to
one of these
spin pass,
games?
man. Just go up with it. Give me a floater or something.
Just do something. You're in the paint, my guy. You
Yep.
you were when healthy, you were like a second team All NBA type of player. Like
Hmm.
you play like you're him, and he wasn't
Yep.
doing it, and I was frustrated. And then 2 minutes later, he just goes on this run where he's just shooting all these threes. He had that one three where I think he passed it to Nemhard, sprints down. I don't even think he looked at the rim. He just like he caught that thing and went whoop. As
Yep.
Edward would say, he shot that from Yucatan, man. Like it was
Hmm.
crazy. I need that.
He has that ability in him, and I think that's why they'll at least get one game in this series because he will
Yeah.
be that guy that we saw in Game 7 versus the Knicks for sure. So this series as well is going to be so much fun to watch. I can't wait to see how the Pacers kind of continue their incredible ascension. That's a little bit unexpected. They might have looked into some things here, but got to give them credit. They've played their cards really well in the playoffs, and it's going to be up to the Celtics to counter how they've played their cards here so far.
They actually played their bench and they had a bench they could play. And ultimately, that's what decided the series. Just before you close it out, I just want to wrap it up. It's just, I think this year's playoffs, if there was a takeaway, people do takeaways from the final four. What have we learned? If there's one thing I've learned from here, it's you need to have good offensive counters for whatever the defense starts presenting you. That's kind of what got these series across the finish line. And you need at least playoff contributors for you to be able to win some of these series. And of course, you need a starting rotation that can all hang in a playoff series because that's kind of the problem the Thunder ran into, where some of their guys in the playoff setting, just I think because they're young and not fully developed yet, when you start taking things out of their bag, like, hey, maybe you're not going to generate an easy paint touch anymore in the playoffs, they didn't have as many counters. So the quality of their starters wasn't as great as it was in the regular season. So you need that 7 or 8 guys you can count on, and you need to actually play them. You
Hmm.
can't do this. I will play them 40 minutes. Oh, in the first series, and maybe in round 2, we'll still be able to carry it through without anybody getting hurt. It's just not a sustainable way to live.
Right.
Even the Nuggets. By the time we get to Game 7, in that third and fourth quarter, Jokic started looking really gassed defensively. Like
He
some of
did.
these, he's not even jumping up for a contest anymore, and that's not even his fault because the Nuggets bench just is kind of non-existent. So
Wasn't there.
you
Wasn't
need a
there.
team, as the Warriors always say, strength in numbers. That matters, and I think all these teams are going to show how much it matters.
Absolutely, man. Great point. So if you guys are looking for more content like this, be sure to check out our website, which is notradeclause.com. No Trade Clause, one word, is on Instagram, and no trade underscore clause on Twitter, X. You can check out some of our content there as well. So we thank you guys for joining us for another episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. We would greatly appreciate that. And we will certainly catch you guys on the next installment of NTC. Enjoy these playoffs, and we'll see you next time. Take care.